things at once. There we go. It will be available after the event, and I'll send that out to an email to those of you who registered. So if anyone had missed our conversation tonight. Everyone is muted, so if you are having any technical difficulties or if you have a question for Kate, feel free to drop it into the chat box at the bottom of the screen. And if time permits, we'll sort of get to those throughout the evening after we sort of get started. To get us going, I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement. So Midland Public Library acknowledges and is thankful for the opportunity to work on the traditional territory of the Wendat and Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe, which includes the Chippewa, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa people. We especially acknowledge the Chippewa of Beausoleil First Nation and Rama First Nation, who were the stewards of the lands in and around Midland. We also recognize the Métis nationhood currently represented in our community by the Georgian Bay Métis Council. We recognize and deeply respect their ongoing and historic connection to these lands. These connections need to be clearly and overtly articulated as part of our collective agreement to make the promise and challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our community. Welcome to our last virtual author visit of 2020. It has been quite a year. I think I've never been so excited to see the end of a year as I am in this 2020, that's for sure. And I'd like to take the time to introduce Kate, our special guest. Kate is the best-selling author of The Hole in the Middle, Just Like Family, and the recently released novel Better Luck Next Time. Kate is an experienced media contributor and has appeared on Breakfast Television, CBC Early Edition, Global Morning, CTV Morning, and other local and regional shows. Kate lives in a blended family, including a husband, 2 sons, a stepdaughter, and a rescue dog in Toronto, where she's currently working on her fourth novel. Welcome, Kate. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm so happy to be here. As we were saying earlier, my family has for many decades, almost 100 years actually, had a summer home in this year. That didn't happen and we got pushed into November, which is fine too, but I'm really happy to be able to have a little virtual drop in there.
Oh, well, we're so happy to have you, and congratulations on the publication of Better Luck Next Time. This is great. We really appreciate your taking the time. Matter of fact, we'd like to start off with a little bit of a reading from Better Luck Next Time. Would you mind giving us a little bit of a teaser about what the book is about?
And okay. So let me tell you a couple of things about the book, because I'm gonna, I thought I would jump in sort of in the middle, and I don't want to read for too long because I think people's eyes glaze over, understandably, at least mine do when I listen to readings of any length. So Better Luck Next Time has 3 different points of view, and it follows the life of an extended family, several members of which are experiencing huge life changes, and they're all trying to figure out kind of where they go from here. So they've all had this moment of realizing that the plans that they've made for their lives have fallen apart, and they need to figure out where they go in their lives from here. And so one of the characters, who is named Zoe, who is a little public relations company. She's an entrepreneur. She has just had her marriage fall apart after many years of kind of trying to convince herself that it was going to work. And she is she is in midlife, and so she's trying to figure out if there still may be another relationship out there for her. And she dives into online dating with some real optimism, and immediately, of course, realizes that it is not an absolutely optimistic experience to be online dating. This is somewhat based on my own personal history. I found myself divorced in my early 40s, and with trepidation entered the world of online dating and had some truly horrendous experiences, but am now very happily remarried to someone, I venture to say, who I also met in that way. So I'm not I don't want to discourage people from online dating, but if you've ever done it, you know that it has a horrendous side to it. And this is one of Zoe's online dates. Okay. Zoe's brother is Zach. So in this chapter, you'll meet Zoe, her brother Zach, and her online date, Dave. Okay. Zach is fussing. Are you sure you're ready? You're the one who's been pushing me to do this. I know, but I want you to have a good experience out there. So does Zoe. Up to this point, she'd rate the experience as mildly negative overall. She's weathered the complete pre-dating cycle, from winks and pokes to lighthearted messages peppered with emojis, to gentle inquiries about relationship status, to frank expressions, some far too frank, with regrettable personal photos attached, of interest. She's had her hopes dashed and raised. She's bowed out graciously and been ghosted mysteriously. It's all normal, she's been assured by seasoned veterans, and terribly time-consuming, and vaguely enervating. Tonight, though, she's breaking the online seal and leaving her house to meet an apparently single male human, IRL. Although she can never remember what the acronyms mean, she has a dictionary of online jargon bookmarked. The human in question is Dave, a divorced entrepreneur who loves to travel. It will be what it will be, she says. Very philosophical, Zach says. That's a smart mindset. And you look fantastic. But take it slow. Manage your expectations. It's a drink, Zach. I know how to have a drink without ending up married or dead in a ditch. I worry about you. That's extremely sweet, but completely unnecessary. I feel like I'm sending my baby off to college for the first time. I'm older than you are. I'm proud of you. God, Zach, you're making me 1,000 times more nervous. Shut up, will you? Zach follows her to the front door. Break a leg. I've got my phone. Text me if you need a rescue, understood? Remember that Will and Oscar are coming at 7:30. You guys can decide what to order, okay? I'll text you if I'm going to be later. She blows Zach a kiss and closes the door gently in his face. She's arranged to meet Dave at a bar around the corner, so she doesn't have far to travel in heels. She talks a good game, but she's rattled, honestly, by how off balance she feels. She hasn't been on a date with anyone except Richard since her early 30s, which means, she realizes, she's never been on a date with a grown-up before. What do they talk about? She snags a table by the window with a view of the street and the entire room. Control the environment. Remove the element of surprise. This is an experiment, and she's going to manage the variables. She orders a glass of wine. Zoe? Unfortunately, you can't control for random dudes appearing out of nowhere. She has to get rid of this one quickly. Dave will be here any moment. I'm so sorry, Zoe says. I'm terrible with faces. This isn't true, but it's convenient. Remind me how we know each other? We don't, says the man. At least not yet. I'm Dave. You look exactly like your picture. Oh, says Zoe. Dave looks nothing whatsoever like his picture. Of course, what was I thinking? Nice to meet you. She stands and they shake hands. Dave removes his coat and settles into the seat opposite. So, he says. So, she says. Here we are. It takes 3 seconds, she's read, to decide whether or not someone is attractive. This date is a mistake, but she needs to fill at least half an hour for the sake of civility. The server brings her a drink. What will you have, she asks Dave. Water's good for me, he says. Panic sets in. Why isn't he drinking? Is drinking frowned upon at a first meeting? Is she sending the wrong signals? Why did he suggest meeting for a drink? Or was she the one who suggested it? She can't remember. What if he can't drink for medical reasons? Does he think she's insensitive? Or that she drinks inappropriately? Does she? Her brain is a hamster on speed. Is she having a full-scale anxiety attack right here in the bar? Why is she freaking out when there's zero chemistry anyway? How long have you been dating? Dave is speaking, and she forces herself to pay attention. Not long, she says, pleased at how normal she sounds. I separated a few months ago. Ah, he says. How are you finding it? Kind of disconcerting so far. It can be. I've been at it for a couple of years. It definitely gets easier. He smiles, and she recognizes the smile from his online pictures. The worst part is that you get tired of listening to yourself give the same introductory speech over and over again. You start to think, am I as boring to my date as I am to myself? There's no need for alarm. A grown-up first date Zoe sees as a cocktail party for two, and she can chit-chat with the best of them for 30 minutes. She leans in. You said you were an entrepreneur? That's right. What a coincidence. So am I. What kind of business are you in? I'm in tech. Fascinating. Zoe wonders if she can shorten this down to 20 minutes. What do you do? I execute and lead. You execute and lead what? Projects. Okay, better than executing people, I guess. Neither of them laugh. What kind of projects? She wishes Dave would pick up some of the conversational slack. She feels herself starting to sweat. Well, no, you're new at this, says Dave. This feels like a job interview, not a date. My apologies, says Zoe. In fact, she thinks it would be a great leap forward in online dating if she could review CVs instead of profiles. Dave and his mysterious employment would never have made the cut. Don't worry about it, says Dave. I can be oversensitive about my career. Totally normal, says Zoe, her inner alarm system ringing at full strength. So this place is cool, says Dave. Have you been here before? I have. I live close by. Nice. I wish I could afford to live downtown. I thought you did, says Zoe. Dave looks sheepish. I put that on my profile, didn't I? Sorry about that. Some women are really shallow about that kind of thing. I didn't want to get ruled out just because I live in the suburbs. Zoe, whose profile includes the restriction, must live downtown, swallows the last of her drink and signals for another.
Oh, thank you for that. That is an excellent little glimpse into the Better Lucks Next Time.
You're welcome.
I just am reliving it over again, and it's so much of the book. So much of the book, and I'm sure this will come up, is relatable. I think that, or at least I have found that for sure. From the family to little glimpses of things like this. If not yourself, then you know a friend who has, or something like that. So I think that is great. Where, to get us started in the questions, where did the idea for this book come from?
So I have found with all of my books that they actually have a few different germination points. So there's usually one main idea. And in this case, the big idea was, as I said, I went through this divorce in my 40s, but also a huge career change and a lot of other changes that are kind of, normal in midlife. I had some changes in kind of my social group, a lot of different things. So it felt like a period of my life where the sort of tectonic plates were moving around. And it surprised me, even though I think culturally we understand that midlife is a time of profound change. I somehow was surprised that it turned out to be so for me, and it struck me that it was an interesting premise to think about how a whole set of different people in a family all sort of arrive at a point in life where things are changing on them, and that the plans they had made really were not going to come to pass the way they had imagined, and to see different people in the same way that we see different people in our families or friend groups grapple with this stage of life in different ways, to see how a set of characters all sort of entering this life stage at the same time would grapple differently with the kinds of challenges that they were faced with. So that was kind of the germinating idea, was to really write a book about the reinvention process and what it looks like for different people, and to set the book like almost as a time-lapse photograph. So the book takes place over the course of a year, and you drop in on characters month by month by month. And so every month you drop in and you can really watch the evolution take place kind of at steady increments over the course of a year. And I like that. I found that kind of a hopeful, when that idea came to me, in terms of structure. Maybe we'll talk later about writing, but I'm quite a structure focused writer. I think underlying structure really matters a lot, and I like to play with time in my books, which makes structure all the more important. So setting it over the course of a year, where it unfolded, each character's sort of journey unfolded over a 12-month period, really appealed to me as an idea. But then, during the time that I was writing the book, there were other kind of cultural forces at work. So one of the kind of secondary things that happens in the book is that the matriarch is a feminist icon, kind of the Gloria Steinem vintage, let's say. And she is really experiencing kind of a burst of fame. I mean, she has been famous for much of her life, but in the process of all of the women's marches taking place around the world, she is having kind of a little bit of a renaissance of her own, and really in the public eye again. And so there's a secondary kind of exploration in the book about, which was just kind of like a thought experiment that I started doing when I was engaged in the women's marches and thinking about kind of the big second wave feminists. And I'd seen Gloria Steinem speak that year. I'm a big fan of hers, by the way. And she's just every bit as groovy as you might think she would be. And so I got to thinking, like, what would it be like to have, instead of a patriarch, a matriarch who was famous in this way, and how sort of that, how feminism from a mother like that would dribble down to a family of girls. And so that was another thing I was just having some fun with in the book.
Really neat. And was it Gloria Steinem that you had in mind when you created the character of Lydia?
No, because I venerate Gloria Steinem, actually. So you can't write characters you venerate. It's just boring, right? So Lydia is a super complicated cat. I mean, maybe Gloria is too, but not in my mind, because I've been a fan since I was 14. So Lydia is very, she's very strong. She's very opinionated. She has a lot of strengths. But as a parent, she has this complicated quality of having been very conscious of her legacy, and not wanting her family in any way to kind of undercut her message of female empowerment. And that has affected her daughters in different ways, because they're all quite different personalities.
Thanks. My next question was about characters, and you kind of touched on this, but there are so many vibrant characters in this book, and I love that you put the little like who's who in the beginning. I thought that was great.
I always like to include things in books that I appreciate as a reader, right? So I like a family tree. You get distracted. Sometimes you put a book down for a while and you need to remember who people are. Yeah.
No, it was great. I really enjoyed that. So many of these characters, as I've mentioned, are relatable to me and could very well be members of my own family. And so I wondered, were there specific, like where your inspiration for these characters came from? So I touched a little bit on Lydia and Gloria Steinem, because that's the kind of person, maybe not her specifically, but I definitely had in mind while I was reading Lydia. But even like Zach is a character, so I wondered if you was there any specific inspiration for any of these books, or pieces of yourself that you see reflected in some of these characters?
Well, I think the truth is that when you're a writer, there's a little bit of you in every single character you write, right? So to put it in the broadest sense, like when I say the sky is blue, I'm only thinking about what a blue sky looks like to me, right? So that is to say, when I'm writing a selfish character, it's like, what do I think is selfish behavior, right? Or, how do I, when I'm feeling, a bit martyred about my life, what does that how do I express that, right? So we really are embedded in all of our characters, even the super unattractive ones, and that's not the honest truth. But with these characters, I'm increasingly, over the course of my writing career, I think I've ventured further afield in my characterizations because I've gotten more confident, and I've gotten more curious about different kinds of characters than the ones that necessarily kind of inhabit my day-to-day life. With with Zach, like, I don't actually know a Zach. I don't have a younger brother. I don't, but I find that quite easy to, I mean, the social media permits us to kind of drop into all kinds of people's thoughts and worlds, right? So it's pretty easy to find like a mid-30s TV director on Twitter any day of the week, right? And just kind of, what are they thinking about? What are they preoccupied by? Like, how do they spend their free time? So I do like that kind of experiment of dropping into someone's head. With the women, so Mariana, who's one of the sisters, is a person who is a journalist, who is increasingly embittered, I would say, by the state of print journalism and by sort of the institution in which she finds herself. And I have wonderful friends who are journalists. Liz Renzetti is one of my closest friends. And I also acknowledge Marcia Lederman in this book. Both of them were very generous about letting me interview them about what it is like to be a feminist journalist in the age of social media, and gave me some really interesting insights into that business. I must say I admire their bravery. I honestly do. It's not an easy job these days. So I wouldn't say they, I like to write really flawed characters. So I'm always very careful to say they're not based on people I know. So, but I did some research on what that would look like by talking to those two wonderful journalists. And then there are also a couple of sort of more broadly comic send-ups of the wellness industry. So, Mariana leaves journalism and goes and works for a wellness company that you might imagine as kind of a Goop style, Gwyneth Paltrow cultish kind of wellness company. And that was, I mean, that's just fun. That kind of thing is just really fun to write, to send it. I mean, there's a lot of material to work with. Beata, one of the other daughters, is in a secret relationship with a woman that she hasn't told anyone about, and that was just interesting to think about why someone who is otherwise, she's been a yoga instructor and she's kind of in the naturopathic world, but is in that one way very secretive about her life, and she's raising a teenage son. I also raised teenagers, so some of my own life experience of raising, challenging young men was in the book. But my own experiences kind of like are more like seasoning, like they kind of sprinkle in here and there. But I got quite taken with these women and their struggles, and it's interesting for me to explore other people's lives. I mean, I'm in this one all the time, so I don't really want to write. I get bored of it. I'm sort of, it's more fun to figure out how other people live. Yeah.
I think that is great to hear, that sort of, because that's what you as a reader kind of do, right? You read a book to step into somebody else's shoes. So it's very interesting to sort of hear from the writer's perspective that you're doing the same thing. Like, what would someone like this think, or how would they think, or how would they react, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You kind of touched on it a little bit there in your response, but in the past, for part of our author series, we posted historical fiction authors like Jennifer Robson, and so research for historical fiction novel is, I'm wholly assuming here, but probably wildly different when you're writing something that's contemporary. Can you you speak a little bit more about your research process, either for Better Luck Next Time or any of your work in general?
Sure. Yeah. I'm actually quite, I've been confronted by that difference because my fourth novel is a historical mystery. So I've been doing much more sort of specific historical research for that because it's a dual timeline, but the historical parts are set in Egypt in the sort of early 1900s. And that's been fun because I have a very curious mind, like most writers. And so I have immensely enjoyed just kind of reading. And it's really fun when you get to read for work, right? So I just have very much enjoyed, getting tons of stuff out of my local library. And, it's like really getting in on the interlibrary loan train and having, my local library, it's just quite tiny and has a small collection. So they're always bringing things in for me. They're very sweet. But so that was really fun. And I have this giant book. I'll show you. This was my big splurge this year, the Oxford Handbook of Paperology. So I'm doing research on papyrus studies. It's quite arcane, but seriously fascinating stuff. So I have this sort of collection of weird historical sources. But when I'm doing my contemporary stuff, when I first started writing, I was doing workplace comedy, like my first book, and to some extent my second book are workplace situated, because I felt like it was sort of missing. We spend so much time at work, and it was kind of missing from fiction for me, that people just didn't write about the workplace. I think it's partly because a lot of writers, haven't spent a lot of time in traditional workplaces maybe, but it's more something you see a lot more in film and TV than you see in fiction. So I started being very careful about choosing workplaces that I had worked in myself, and I've had a lot of careers, so I had a bunch of things to choose from, or that were adjacent. So I'd done fundraising in the public sector, and I'd worked in a law firm, I'd been a lawyer, and I'd worked in a publishing house, and so I had like lots of things to choose from. So at least initially I was trying to stick with professions that I'd spent time in myself and had a good feel for. But then I got more curious about it. So with my second book, it's set at City Hall. So I spent some time talking to people who'd done political staff jobs to try to get that right. And for this book, I have so many people doing so many things. Like I have a surgeon from a war zone, and I have I'm going to tell you something. My dog is crying and crying and crying and crying at the door, making such a fuss. I'm going to let her in if you don't mind. You're going to see her like.
Let her in.
You're also going to see I'm wearing the most unattractive clogs on my feet, but really I can't. It's so distracting. So just bear with me for a second here. Okay, come on. You're being so annoying. Come in. You're being so annoying. Gosh. Okay, here. There. Have your bone. Hush. Okay, there we go. She's really wonderful, but she gets so mad if she gets left out. It's just incredible. Anyway, that's Shelby. Yeah, she has quite a strong internet presence. Actually, you can follow her antics on Instagram and other places, but she's just been crying her little heart out for like 10 minutes. Sorry about that. So anyway, we're talking about careers, but I had some fun with this book, just doing a little bit of research. The truth is, for contemporary stuff, sometimes I talk to people who I know, who I think have some, particularly if I'm trying to make a political point and it seems really important to me to get it right. Can you hear her chomping on her bone now? But otherwise, I think that, like, honestly, Twitter and Instagram and, my friend Karma Brown, who you may know, does a lot of her research from People Magazine. Like, she has People Magazine pop up every morning. She said she gets some of the craziest story ideas from People Magazine. It's just, you can access so much information about contemporary life just by sitting at your desk, right? So that piece of it is easy. And actually the danger is that you just never write anything because you're so busy surfing. So I would say, when it comes to contemporary life, although this is also true of historical research too, like, you just have to know when to turn off the tap and start doing the harder work of writing. Yeah.
Fair. The writing process is different for every writer. Can you tell us a little bit about yours? Or do you outline everything before you start? Do you, when you're writing, do you have specific goals per day or per week or things like that? Can you tell us about what the process is like for you?
So, I mean, someone asked me this the other night and I burst out laughing because honestly, like in COVID, my process has just been like all over the map. I would love to tell you I'd been so disciplined this year, but it's been a bit of a mess. But my goal on every writing day, and not every day for me is a writing day because I have other things that I do. I sit on 3 boards. I'm also in school. I'm training to be a psychotherapist. So at least one day a week I'm in school, and then I'm also often writing papers and other things. But on days when I write, I try to produce 1,000 words a day, 1,000 decent words. And then I often set other targets for myself about like weekly word counts, just depending on what kind of deadlines I've set for myself. So right now, because I'm hoping to get a draft of this other book done by the end of December, I really am trying to do 5,000 words a week. Which, because I don't actually write on 5 different days, is like I'm upping my daily word count a little bit. It's probably more like 1,300 or 1,400 a day. But um, I do find it easier to work in word count increments, right? Because I don't necessarily like, I have friends who just say, okay, look, like I get up at this hour and this is my hour of writing and I do it every single day. And then, what I produce, right? But I do that every day. For me, I find it easier not to be quite as rigid about my schedule, but to be pretty rigid about output over the course of a week. But I think that, as you say, there really is no hard and fast rule about that. And I've done different things at different points in my career, depending on what my how available kind of writing time was for me. So, as we were saying just at the beginning, Jennifer, I when I wrote my first book, I actually was working full time, and so I set aside 3 hours on Sunday afternoons and just um, absolutely, put the hammer down for those 3 hours every week. And then I would, jot down notes over the course of the week, but I really would just have that 3 hours and it was solid writing time and that was it. And so that's like a long way to write a book. I mean, it took a while, but you can absolutely do it that way. And I did, and that was my first book. The Hole in the Middle was written in 3 hour increments. Yeah.
No. And so how long does it take you to write a novel? And was it different for every novel that you've written?
Yeah, so I always said, for a long time I said, oh, this is an unusual book because like these things happened when I was writing this book. But now I realize, life just happens with every book. So you can usually anticipate some major life eruption at some point in the middle of a book that throws you off course. But I think it maybe wave at me if you can hear me.
Sorry, you did freeze, but you're good.
I did freeze. Okay. So sorry, I'm not sure where you lost me, but I think I was going to say it takes me, I think, about 2 years from just like the first glimmer of an idea to really like a finished final draft. But there are a lot of fallow periods in there for me, actually. So a first draft probably takes me about 6 months, you know. Um, I do about 6 months of like thinking and outlining, and usually it overlaps. Oh no, see, my dog's now licking herself. See, she's just like, she's good entertainment back there. I truly apologize for her.
Cool. Mine is downstairs. It's all,
Hey. I apologize on her behalf because she doesn't know enough to be embarrassed for herself. Anyway, so I have a slow burn at the beginning. Like a lot of writers kind of really dive in, and I find I'm an outliner, so I have a very extensive outline before I begin writing. I find I need that to feel confident. I know many writers who I think are wonderful writers who kind of just start on page one and go, and then they'll rewrite it many, many times. I mean, we all rewrite it many times, but I find myself quite inhibited if I don't have an outline, if I don't know what I'm doing. And so for me, that just ends up, it's worth investing that time at the beginning, because then I feel a lot freer to, and the outline does evolve. Like I will find as I'm writing that maybe something isn't working and I'll go back and redo it. But just having a roadmap is important for me. And then usually like that outlining stage is happening while, I'm refining a draft of another book, right? So it's not it's not like every day for 6 months I'm writing an outline, but it does seem to be kind of new ideas popping up, and secondary storylines and other ideas for characters and so on. That whole process is around 6 months. And then I would say it's about 6 months for a first draft. Sometimes with time off for bad behavior because something strange has happened and I just have had to put it down. And then I love, like, so for me, my favorite part, aside from the one exception to this, is that doing research for the historical fiction book was like as much fun as I've ever had. I loved that part. But I like the editing stage much, much, much better than I like the drafting stage. So for me, the drafting stage is like just a long march. And then I usually go through at least 2 sets of edits, and I really enjoy that part. And so there are gaps. So like I'll hand in a first draft of this book I'm working on now in December, and it'll probably be gone for a couple of months. And it'll come back and I'll rework it, and then it'll go away again for more time, and maybe in that process it'll get sold, and then an editor will come in who has other ideas for it and so on. So that process of kind of having it leave and come home and leave and come home, that often can take 8 months or so, with big gaps of time in between. So this is why writers often have more than one project on the go, because they're at different stages of the life cycle. Yeah.
And who is your first reader?
It has changed, it has changed with different books. For this book, my mom is always one of my first readers. My friend Marie, who's a former agent and just has, I think, exquisite taste in books, is always one of my first readers. I have in the past occasionally hired someone. So certainly with my first book, I hired an editor to be one of my first readers. I haven't had to do that since because I have an editor, but for people who are aspiring writers, I think that's money incredibly well spent to hire a professional editor. It's actually surprisingly inexpensive, and I think it's a really good thing to do if your ultimate goal is publication. And then I have, as you may know, I belong to this incredible group of female writers who are very close friends of mine. We call ourselves the Coven, but it's Jennifer Robson, Karma Brown, Marissa Stapley, Liz Renzetti, Carrie Clare, and Chantel Gurton, and me. So there are 7 of us, and we're all commercial fiction writers. And some of us also do other things, like Liz, as you'll know, is a journalist, and Chantel is a beauty expert on television, but she's also an incredibly funny and excellent writer. And if you don't know some of those writers' work, I truly encourage you to go find them. They're all, I think, exquisite writers and just lovely humans. And we all came into the business at kind of the same time. We all kind of met each other at various festivals and other things, and this was about, I guess, 7 years ago, and sort of formed a little group because there weren't that many people writing commercial fiction in Canada at the time. And now, it's our small group and we're very close and we do share our early work back and forth. But there's also this sort of army of female commercial fiction writers like Rosnay and Hannah Mary McKinnon and Robin Harding and Usma Jalaluddin. Like there are just tons of them. There are probably like 30 of us, and we have a larger group that we support each other's work and promote each other's work. We meet for dinner every year or so when we're not in lockdown. And it's been it's been a wonderful part of the business for me because, writing's solitary and I spent most of my life, in offices and having work colleagues. And it's been really great to feel like we have a community, and we can kind of lean on each other for support when we need it, but also to kind of celebrate the good news is also a nice thing. So yeah, that's been a really wonderful part of my writing life, is having access to these terrific women.
I think it's fantastic. And here's a little library tip for all of the patrons who are listening in. For your next book recommendation, you really need look no further than the acknowledgements of the one you're reading, right? Because especially with those of you in the coven, there's always the acknowledgements of everybody who's in there. I just finished Carrie Clare's Waiting for a Star to Fall.
Isn't it a great book?
So good.
Yeah, I think it's really terrific. Carrie is, I think, like an underrated writer, like, by which I mean people should know her better than they do. She's really talented. And I think her latest book is excellent.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And so it's so great that it's, as a reader, it's very interesting and neat to have one of the members of the coven as sort of your gateway into the other ones. So there you are. It's a library tip. You had mentioned about some advice for aspiring readers. I'm sure that there will be either folks who are watching the tape or those in the audience who have sort of, the age-old adage of like everyone's got one novel in them, or aspiring writers. Any other advice that you would share, either from your own personal experience, or even a piece of advice that you received yourself?
Well, I think to someone who, it sort of depends. Like if I don't think everyone has a book in them. but I do think that I do think that if you think you have a book in you, you should absolutely try to write it, because there is honestly nothing more satisfying than holding a finished book in your hands, for sure. That's kind of gravy, though. I would say knowing that you finished a book when you've been a lifelong lover of books, right? And feeling proud of that piece of work. It's like climbing Everest, I imagine. I haven't climbed Everest. I don't intend to climb Everest. It's my Everest, though, right? Like when I finished my first book, and I'd given it to a couple of people, and they'd come back and say, "Yeah, it's pretty good." I just felt amazing about that achievement. And I thought, like, no one can take that away from me, it just felt so good. And I remind myself of that often because as a writer, as a working writer, the bar is always getting moved, right? So you have a book, you have a best-selling book, then you feel like, maybe you want your book to be higher on the bestseller list next time, or you want it to like be a bestseller somewhere else, or you want it to be on the New York Times. Like there's always another achievement. You want it to win awards, whatever, right? There's always another achievement. But all of that is outside your control, right? That what's in your control is producing work that you're proud of. And I try to keep my eye on that ball, because that's the piece I control, and ultimately that's the most satisfying part. And so I just, with every book, try really hard to remember that I'm trying to produce the best work that I can. I'm trying to stretch myself a little bit with every book. I'm trying to take a risk I didn't take before. I'm trying not to fall into kind of grooves. I'm trying to stretch. And if at the end of writing a book I feel like I've done those things, then that's the achievement, right? And I guess what I want to say is that achievement is available to anyone, and it's a wonderful achievement, and it feels amazing. And a lot of people ask me about getting published, and I'm happy to talk about that. But I think you don't write a book because you want to be published. Of course we all want to, but that's not. It's a journey. It's its own journey, and it truly is the completion of a book that you're proud of is its own reward. And then what happens after that is to some extent out of your hands, but you have to really love the journey. You have to love the creative process, because the business side of it, in fact, I was just literally having this conversation with the coven today, um, you know, because all of us have had great success, but we also had some miserable failures that we don't, and every writer has, we don't talk about that. And, in our community, we talk about both. But we were having this precise conversation about how you constantly have to refocus on the quality of the work and why you do it and why it's and what about it is meaningful to you. Because you cannot, as with other things in life, you really can't look outside yourself for what makes it meaningful, right? So we don't control these things. So yeah, I think writing, there's so much, so to bring my psychotherapy hat in, there's so much psychological research on how important creativity is to a sense of well-being, right? And how important it is for like aging brains, and how important it is for a sense of kind of purpose and meaning and connection in the world. And I think we're kind of born creative, and then most of us grow out of it, and you can always get it back. And so if writing is your particular kind of creative harbor, give it a try. Yeah.
And my last question for you is, what are you reading right now?
Oh my gosh, can you see like behind the dog, like giant pile that's going to fall over and kill the dog? I have so many books on the go right now. It's out of control. So I usually am reading a couple of things at once. I used to be someone who only read one book at a time, but as my life has become more chaotic, so too have my reading patterns, I'm afraid. So I'm reading constantly in the psychology area. So I always have some nonfiction on the go. And I'm reading a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, which is a book about trauma in the body that was on the New York Times bestseller list a couple of years ago. It's absolutely excellent, fascinating, sort of about the neuroscience of trauma. Highly recommended. I just finished reading, and this is another writer friend of mine, Cathy Marie Buchanan's latest book, which is called Daughter of Black Lake. Cathy's a beautiful writer, and this book, if you're an archaeology buff, is fascinating. So Cathy got inspired by the Lindo Man. Do you know who the Lindo Man is? This is like one of the peat bog bodies that they found in Britain from kind of the first century. And she went on this, it took her 8 years to write this book. It's quite amazing. And she created an entirely kind of imaginative world based on, archaeological records. And they have, the National Trust has one of these communities that they've restored and built somewhere in Northern England. But anyway, so it's about a community of bog dwellers who are sort of hunkering down, awaiting the Roman invasion. It's amazing. It's a really good book. I have recently read a book also by a Canadian writer, Julia Zarankin, which is this book of essays called Field Notes from an Unintentional Birder. So it's a wonderful gift, actually, if you have bird watchers in your on your list. So I met Julia because she was teaching. Have been in like a book club. I don't usually do book clubs, but I'm in like a Russian literature reading group with Cathy Marie Buchanan and Vincent Lamb and a few other people who live in my neighborhood. And we hired Julia to teach us. She's a Russian literature teacher. So she came, she taught us. We did Anna Karenina with her, and we did Chekhov with her. It was amazing. We've got to get it going again when quarantine's over. Anyway, that's a weird aside, but Julia, it turns out, is also a really beautiful writer, and she wrote this collection of essays that has received a lot of very well-deserved attention, and it's about her evolution as a bird watcher, or birder, I should say, and it's quite wonderful. What else have I got over there? Oh, I read, I don't know if you guys like David Nichols. He wrote One Day, which is a book that I really love. Anyway, he wrote a book that came out this summer called Sweet Sorrow, which is just, it's beautiful. It's quite exquisite. I loved it. And so on my bedside table, I have two of his earlier books that I hadn't read before. Starter for 10 and the Understudy. So I'll get to those over the holidays. Those are my holiday reads. Um, oh, and Amy Jones' book, We're All in This Together, which I haven't started yet, but there aren't that many women writing comedy in Canada, and Amy is one of them. And so we sort of connected on social media, and I was like, I've been meaning to read your book. So I just ordered that one.
That's great.
There you go. I told you it's a big it's a big pile. It's gonna fall over and kill me in my sleep.
Well, you're in good company there. I mean, all the good bookworms have like a bunch, like so many books, so little time, honestly.
Yeah.
I wanted to throw it out there. If anyone has a question for Kate, feel free to drop it into the chat box or signal me in some other way if you have a question. I'll give it a minute or two. That was so great. I swear you have a potential career as a book talker and librarian and reader's advisory with that little spiel there. That was great.
That's very sweet. Thank you. Well, librarians are some of my favorite people, and I spent a lot of my childhood in libraries, so I love them. And librarians have been really good to my books. They've so I'm very grateful.
Well, the feelings are mutual. We enjoy the ability to discuss and share your work. I don't see any questions coming in, so I'll just do a little wrap up. Kate, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us this evening. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Better Luck Next Time is a quick and very fun read. Well, it felt weird for me to read about divorce when my marriage is just 3 years old. I found the family drama very relatable and funny. In my family, we have a lot of overlapping and untraditional connections. And this book beautifully illustrates that concept of accepting your family for who they are. And we're grateful to be able to discuss it this evening and to share it with our patrons. And we look forward to what you have coming out next.
Thank you. I should just say that I know Georgian Bay, I think Sarah from Georgian Bay Books might be on. If it's the same Sarah, I don't know. But Sarah and Sandy from Georgian Bay Books have been big supporters, which I super appreciate, and a lovely bookstore that I have visited. And if you have the book, and these are days where we have trouble signing things, but I do have these little book plates that I can put in the mail to you. And in fact, Georgian Bay Books, I have sent some to you already in an envelope, I think just yesterday, but you can always, if you are giving some as gifts and you would like to have book plates and bookmarks, you can always email me. I'm at kate@katehilton.com, and I can just send me your mailing address and I will shoot you bookmarks and book plates very happily.
That's such an excellent thing. We were discussing a little bit earlier how with these virtual author visits, there's certain things about connecting with an author that you can't replace, and having your book signed is one of those things that I know I really loved about these kinds of events. So those book plates are a great sort of stand-in. And on that note, I was just going to say, you can find copies of Kate's books, including Better Luck Next Time, at the Midland Public Library, or if you'd like to own a copy of any of Kate's work. Oops, sorry, I've got notifications coming here and there. If you'd like to own a copy of any Kate's books, and the holidays are fast approaching, and books
really are
great gifts. I speak from experience. You can purchase them through our friends at Georgian Bay Books here in Midland. I do have a little insider knowledge that they do have copies of Better Luck Next Time, and a few possibly of the backlist stuff. So it is in stock, folks. You can head on out and get it at Georgian Bay Books in downtown Midland, 247 King Street. If you're having, if you have trouble connecting with Kate or didn't catch her email address, feel free to email me as well, and I'll be sure to pass it along to her as well. Thank you to you, our audience, for joining this evening. It's always a pleasure. This series has been great for 2020. Visit our website for a full list of MPL's upcoming programs and events. That's it for tonight. Thank you, everyone. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Kate and Shelby, for the entertainment.
Thanks so much for having me. It was really, really fun. Yeah, I love doing this stuff.
Have a good night, everyone. Take care.